Morning, Colin. Yes, very good, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. We had, I think it was a week or 2 weeks ago, time flies, a session of our working group, the RFID working group, and we've looked at various things during the year, and this one was looking at the use of RFID in the supply chain. I think we had about 40 or 50 retailers joined us. Um, and as we'll come on later on, we actually had some retailers write back to us and said, actually, this one's not right for us, and we're going to skip out. But still, we had a good turnout, and we were discussing how retailers could extend the use of RFID into the supply chain. And we had two speakers who gave us some insights into their business and what they were doing. And then we had a round the room, round the world discussion on what others were up to. I know you take laborious notes on all these, but what were your sort of key takeaways from this session?
Yes, we've been having these meetings for quite a while, haven't we? In terms of just looking at the progression of RFID within retail spaces, and for the most part, the largest number of retailers who are investing in this really start out their journey in their bricks and mortar stores, don't they? That's where they see the real return on investment business case,
Yeah,
particularly around inventory accuracy, on-shelf availability. They're the real winners, for
yeah,
those who are investing in RFID, because often the complexity of the stock keeping units that they have and how RFID can really speed it up, make it more accurate, more transparent. Fantastic wins. And then what as a group, what we're seeing is we're trying to understand how retailers are then moving away from their bricks and mortar to get value added from their investment in RFID.
yeah,
And obviously, the supply chain is one place where you could do that, isn't it? You want to understand how products are moving through what can be quite a complicated, laborious process within their organizations. And so the session was very much focused on saying, how are people beginning to get value from that RFID investment in their supply chains? And I think what we concluded was, for the most part, not very much thus far. I think there are some who are taking some baby steps to say, how can we begin to use tunnels, for instance, to try and measure what stock's coming into our distribution centres and then perhaps what's leaving out to the stores. But there was a sort of a story of where this is quite a sort of robust and hard environment to get RFID to work well, and to get the value out of it. In terms of getting it to count the stock in distribution centres, notoriously big, complicated spaces. So I think what we heard was some were making progress, but actually as an industry, not a lot has been happening in the last year or so. I think in terms of where people are moving with this. I mean, there are obviously some retailers who've really invested heavily, and they're getting the value out of this in terms of making a commitment to understand from the cradle to the grave of their products and
yeah.
using RFID to do that. And they're great and they're really far ahead. But I think my impression from listening to the various retailers on the call was, what, we're still trying to get the value out from our bricks and mortar investment in this, and we're still looking to the horizon of using it in the supply chain. But for many of us, we're still a bit of a way away before we can really say we've maximised the capability of RFID in those spaces.
Yeah, you're right. I don't get the impression that it's yet sort of penetrated that a distribution center operation. As we heard, there's some shielding issues around receiving. Then there's the sort of the whole space is hard to read. We know that retailers in the stores went to huge lengths to sort of separate the back room
Mm,
to the sort of shop floor so they could sort of see where the items were, so they didn't leave the bikinis, in the back room over the summer, and then had to discount them heavily during the winter.
mm,
So we saw a lot of that, and then leaving out, yeah. So apart from the few pioneers, I think the vast majority are still not using it. To your point, and I think for the reasons we've just described, it's quite a difficult technology to make work in big spaces, and to read them. Certainly, I
mm.
remember, back in the day, just having to spin, pallets to be able to read.
Yes,
Or
yes.
I'm not sure whether we're still doing that, but it's not. The readers aren't always necessarily 100%. And again, we had one of the speakers who didn't wasn't able to sort of talk. She's in Australia, was from Cherry Hill Farms. When I interviewed her for this, she had some problems again on the farm. Even just the shielding piece is a real
Mm.
problem. being able to sort of.
It is, and I think certainly for those who don't have bricks and mortar, you think about the e-commerce retailers who obviously do have big distribution centres and um, I suppose for them it's trying to work out to what extent is it solving a problem that we've got within those spaces, and is the investment in putting a tag on every single product gonna really first of all fix that problem, but also be a return on investment for them. How much error is there coming into a DC? In when you're looking at very, very large volumes, and how will getting that from, say, perhaps an error rate of 4% to 2%, does that add enough value to the whole operation to say we want to put a tag on every single thing? The other thing, of course, we found with some retailers is, of course, that when you have an awful lot of suppliers coming into your distribution centres, making sure that every single one of those suppliers is using the right RFID tags and putting them on the right place in the right products and all that. That's a lot of management, a lot of investment in time and energy. And if it's only going to be used within those distribution centres, fulfillment centres, is that value for money compared to other ways in which you can identify product in those spaces, perhaps maybe just working at pallet level or case level, maybe using 2D barcodes, for instance, and other technologies. And I think what we heard was people can just at the moment, we're just the value is really in a different place than in distribution centres at the moment for most people. And there are certainly people who are looking at it. But I came away thinking maybe in the next 5 years, Colin. And I know we say that a lot about.
We've said this before. 1999, we said this, didn't we?
In the next 5 years, we'll see.
In the next 5 years,
more
it'll be bigger than the internet.
Of RFID, yes, exactly. RFID in distribution centres. But I came away thinking there were some real pioneers out there, but it's not, from my perspective, really mainstream at the moment in those spaces. But that's not to say that RFID hasn't got value to retail, of course, but I just think in those spaces people are struggling to really persuade the business that there's value in putting the infrastructure, time and energy in to make it work in those spaces.
Yes, and capacity is much limited in terms of how many people you've got to be able to work on any one particular project. So yeah. Well, look, we'll revisit this in probably another 12 months. I know there's some people out there, DHL and others have looked at this. Chipotle have also looked at this. So it'll be great to see where we get some learnings from other retailers. Our annual sort of in-person meetings actually in a distribution centre in Desigual, October the 9th and 10th. So again, that'll give us another chance to think more about what these supply chain use cases can be. But really appreciate your time to share your thoughts, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, Colin. Take care, mate.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.